This is J. Krishnamurti's second public talk in Santa Monica, California, 1970.
If I may, we will continue where we left off the other day when we met here. We were saying how important it is that there should be a fundamental change in the human psyche. We were saying that this change can only come about through complete freedom. That word, freedom, is a most dangerous word unless we understand completely and absolutely what it means, not only according to the dictionary meaning, but also learn the full implications of that word. Because most of us use that word according to our peculiar tendency, according to our fancy, or politically. But we are going to use that word neither politically nor circumstantially, but rather go into the meaning of it psychologically, inwardly. And before we go into it, we have to also to understand the meaning of the word learn. As we said the other day, we are going to learn together, communicate together, which means partake, share together. And learning is a part of this. Not that you are going to learn from the speaker, but learn by observing, using the speaker as a mirror to observe your own movement of thought, of feeling, of your own psyche, your own psychology. So there is no authority involved in this at all, though the speaker, unfortunately, has to sit on a platform because that's convenient. But that position does not give him any authority whatsoever. So we can brush that aside completely and consider the question of learning, not from another, not from the speaker, but using the speaker to learn about oneself. And to learn, there must be freedom. There must be a great deal of curiosity. And there must be naturally intensity, passion, and an immediacy. You cannot learn if there is no passion, energy to find out. And it implies freedom. If there is any kind of prejudice, any bias of like or dislike, of condemnation, as we were saying the other day, then one cannot possibly learn, only distorts what one observes. So, as we are going to talk about something which needs considerable investigation, exploration together, one must be very clear from the very beginning that you are not learning from the speaker anything at all. You are learning from observing your own psyche, your own self, whatever it is. So there is no question of authority here whatsoever. The word discipline means to learn from another, from a man who knows and you are supposed not to know. So you learn from another. The word discipline implies that. But here, we are using the word discipline not as learning from another, but the observation of oneself demands the discipline which is not suppression, imitation, or conformity, or even adjustment, but actually observe, and that very observation is an act of discipline, which is learning through observation. Please do bear this in mind as we are talking this evening, that we are together going to learn. And that very act of learning is its own discipline, in the sense you have to give a great deal of attention. You have to have a great energy, intensity, and the immediacy of action. Because we're going to talk about fear. And in going into that, we have to consider a great many things, because fear is a very complex business. Unless the mind is completely, absolutely free from fear, every form of action brings about more mischief, more misery, more confusion. So we are going to inquire together the implication of fear and whether it is at all possible to completely be free of it. Not tomorrow, not at some future date, but actually as you leave this hall, so that the burden and the darkness and the misery, the corruption of fear no longer exists. You know this, to understand this, you have to understand also the idea of gradualness. That is, gradually getting rid of fear. There is no such thing of gradually getting rid of fear. Either you completely are free of it or not at all. There is no gradualness, which implies time. Time, not only in the chronological sense of that word, but also in the psychological sense. Time is the very essence of fear, as we shall point out presently. So, in understanding and be freeing of fear, the idea, the conditioning in which one is brought up, the idea to do it gradually, slowly, eventually, must completely come to an end. And that's going to be our first difficulty. Please, if I may point out again, this is not a lecture. It's like two people, friendly, affectionate, inquiring together into a very difficult problem. Because man has lived with fear. He has accepted it. It's part of his life. And we are inquiring into the possibility, or rather, the impossibility of ending fear. You know, what is possible is already done, is already finished. Indeed, if it's possible, you can do it. But what is impossible becomes possible only when you understand that there is no tomorrow at all, psychologically speaking. Here we are confronted with an extraordinary problem of fear. And man apparently has never been able to be rid of it completely. Not only physically, but inwardly, psychologically. He's never done it. He's always escaped from it through various forms of entertainment, religious and otherwise. And the escapes have been an avoidance of what is. And what we are concerned with is the impossibility of being freed from it completely. Therefore, what is impossible becomes possible. First of all, what is actually fear? There is not only physical fear, but also various subtle forms of psychological fears, hidden and open. The physical fears can be understood comparatively easily. But the psychological fears becomes much more complex. And to understand it, there must be freedom to inquire, not an opinion, not dialectical inquiry into the truth of the possibility of ending fear. So first, let us go into this question of physical fear, which naturally affects the psyche, psychosomatic fears. When you meet danger of any kind, there is instant response, physical response. Is that fear? Please, we are inquiring together. You're not learning from me. We are together learning. Therefore, you have to pay a great deal of attention. Because it's no good attending a gathering of this kind and going away with a few set of ideas or formulas that doesn't free the mind from fear. But what does free the mind completely and absolutely, the mind of fear, is to understand it totally, completely. Now, not tomorrow. It's like seeing something wholly, completely. And what you see, you understand. Then it's yours and nobody else's. So there is physical fears, like meeting danger, meeting a precipice, a wild animal, or the fear of falling ill again, having had an illness in the past, the pain of it, the misery of it, and the fear of it happening again. The ordinary physical fears, meeting danger and the response to that danger, is it fear or is it intelligence? Please, you are inquiring, you are going to find out. You meet an animal, a snake, and you respond immediately. That response is the past conditioning which says, be careful. And your whole body, your whole psychosomatic response is immediate. Though it is conditioned, it is the result of the past where you have been told that the animal is dangerous, be careful. Be careful of the car, be careful of the bus, be careful of the precipice, and so on. Any form of danger, meeting it, is it fear or the necessity of self-preservation? and therefore intelligence. Then there is the fear of having this pain, physical pain again. You have had physical pain of some kind or another, and you don't want it again. And so you're afraid that it might happen. Right? Now what has taken place there? Is that intelligence? Or is it an action of thought which is the response of memory of having had pain and fearing that it might happen again? Is this clear? That thought produces fear. Right? We'll go into it. You will see it. And there are the various forms of psychological fears. Fear of death, fear of your wife or your husband, fear of society, fear of not being respectable, fear of what people might say, fear of darkness, and so on. So many forms of fear. We cannot obviously go into the many forms of fears. That would take too long, and that would be wholly unnecessary. Now, before we go into this question of fear, psychological fears, we have to understand something very clearly. We are not analyzing. Analysis has nothing whatsoever to do with observation, with seeing. In analysis, there is always the analyzer and the thing analyzed. The analyzer is a fragment of the many other fragments of which we are as human beings. One fragment assumes the authority of the analyzer and begins to analyze. Now, what is involved in that? The analyzer is the censor, is the knower, is the entity who assumes that he has knowledge. And therefore, he has the authority to analyze. And when he does analyze, unless he analyzes completely, truly, without any distortion, his analysis has no value at all. Right? Please do understand this very carefully, because we are not analyzing. The speaker does not maintain the necessity of analysis whatsoever at any time. It's rather a bitter pill to swallow, but listen to it. Because most of you either have been analyzed or going to be analyzed or have studied what analysis is. Analysis implies not only the analyzer separate from the analyzed. Is that a fact? Then analysis implies time. Gradually you have to analyze bit by bit the whole series of fragments of which you are. And that involves years. And when you analyze, the mind must be absolutely clear and free to analyze. Otherwise, if there is any form of distortion, the analysis has no value. So those two things are involved. The analyzer, a part of the fragment, who separates himself from the rest of the other fragments and says, I am going to analyze. And analysis implies also time, day after day, in looking, criticizing, condemning, judging, evaluating, remembering. Analysis also implies the whole drama of dreams. And one never asks if it is necessary to dream at all. Though all the psychologists say you must. Otherwise you go mad. All these things are involved in analysis. So, the first thing is, who is the analyzer? Part of yourself, part of your mind. And he is going to examine the other parts. And he is the result of the past experience, past knowledge, past evaluations. He is the center from which he is going to examine. Right? We are not agreeing or disagreeing, we are examining. And he becomes, the analyzer, becomes the center from which to observe. Has that center any truth, any validity? Because all of us function from a center. And what is that center? That center is a form of fear, anxiety, greed, pleasure, despair, hope, dependency, ambition, greed, comparison, all that. That is the center from which we think and act. This is a fact, not a supposition, not a theory, not a formula, but this is an absolute, observable, daily fact. And in that center, there are very many fragments. And one of the fragments becomes the analyzer, which is so absurd. Because the analyzer is the analyzed. You must understand this completely, otherwise we won't be able to understand when we go into the question of fear much more deeply. And you have to understand it completely. Because when you leave this hall, you must be free of it. So that you can live, enjoy, look at the world differently, with different eyes. Have a relationship no longer burdened with fear, with jealousy, with despair. So that we become human beings, not violent, destructive animals. So, the analyzer is the analyzed. And the separation between the analyzer and the analyzed is the whole process of conflict. And when you analyze, as we said, it involves time, because there are so many fragments. The fragment of despair, the fragment of ambition, fulfillment, frustration, dependency, anxiety, guilt, pleasure, fear, hope. You have to examine every fragment. And that will take you all the rest of your life. And by the time you have analyzed all of this, you are ready for the grave. And you haven't lived at all. Now don't laugh. Please, this is not an entertainment. This is dreadfully serious. It's only the earnest, serious person that knows what life is, what living is, not the man who seeks entertainment, amusement. And therefore this demands a great deal of earnest inquiry. And we are doing it together. You're not learning from me. The speaker has no value at all. It's like like a telephone. So, the mind must be completely free of the idea of analysis, because it has no meaning. Not because the speaker says so, but you see the truth of the whole business of an analysis. And the truth will bring understanding. Truth is understanding of the falseness of analysis. Therefore, when you see that which is false, you can put it aside completely. It's only when we don't see, then we are confused. Now we can look into the psychological fears. Not the many multitudinous fears, but fear. There is only one fear, though one may have different causes of fear. That there is only fear. Whether it comes about through various reactions, through various objects, through various influences and all the rest of it, there is only fear. And fear does not exist by itself. It exists in relation to something. which again is fairly simple and obvious. And what takes place? One is afraid of something, afraid of the future, afraid of the past, afraid of not being able to fulfill, afraid of frustration, afraid of not being loved, afraid of living a lonely, miserable life, afraid of old age and death. So there is fear, both recognizable and the hidden. Now what we are inquiring is not into any particular form of fear, but the totality of it. Both the conscious as well as the hidden. Right, are we going together? Are we? I hope so. What is fear? How does it happen? And also, in asking that question, you have got also to ask the question, what is pleasure? Because fear and pleasure go together. You cannot discard or be free of fear without understanding pleasure. They are both the sides of one coin. So in understanding the truth of fear, you're also understanding the truth of pleasure. If you say, I only want pleasure, no fear, that's an impossible state. But whereas if you understood both of them, then we shall have quite a different appreciation, quite a different understanding of both of them. Which means that we have to learn the structure and the nature of fear as well as the structure and the nature of pleasure. You can't be free of one and hold on to the other. So what is fear and what is pleasure? Strangely, if you observe yourself, you want to get rid of fear. The whole modern and the ancient doesn't matter. All life is an escape from fear. Your gods, your churches, your morality, which is no morality at all, is based on fear. And to understand it, you have to understand how this fear comes about. You have done something in the past and you don't want another to find out. That's one form of fear. You're afraid of the future, either because you have no job or you are threatened and so on, future. So you're afraid of the past, you're afraid of the future. Fear comes when thought looks back to the events or to things that have happened in the past, or to things and events that may happen in the future. Thought is responsible, right? If you did not think about death, and you have very carefully avoided, especially in America, not to think about death. But it's always there. And you don't want to think about it. Because the moment you think about it, you are afraid. And because you are afraid, you have theories about it. You believe in resurrection, reincarnation, dozens of beliefs. All because you are afraid. Which is thought. Thought creates, sustains fear of yesterday and of tomorrow, and thought also sustains pleasure. You have seen a beautiful sunset. At that moment there was great joy. The beauty of the light on the water, the light on the mountains, the light on the trees and the movement of the trees. It's great delight, great enjoyment. Then thought comes along and says, I wish I could have it again. I want it again. You begin to think about it. And you go to that place again tomorrow and you don't see it. So thought plays. This is not a formula for you to learn, but to understand together. Therefore, there is no agreement or disagreement. Thought breeds fear, and thought sustains and nourishes pleasure. You have had sexual pleasure, and you think about it. You chew on it. You build images, pictures, and thought sustains it. There is thought sustaining pleasure and thought sustaining fear. So thought is responsible. Right? So what is thought? Thought is obviously the response of memory. If you had no memory, there would be no thought. If you had no memory of your house and the road to your house, you wouldn't get there. So thought not only breeds, sustains fear and pleasure, but thought also is necessary to function, to act efficiently. Because thought is the response of past accumulated memories, experience, knowledge. See how difficult it becomes, where thought must be employed completely, most efficiently, objectively, when you function technologically, when you do anything. And also, thought breeds fear and pleasure. and therefore pain. So, one asks oneself the question, what place has thought? Where is the thin line between when thought must be employed completely and when thought mustn't interfere when you see the most beautiful sunset and live it at that moment and forget it at that moment? Because thought, the whole process of thinking, is never free. Thought is never free because it has its roots in the past. Thought is never new. There is no question of freedom in choice. Because thought is in operation when you choose. So we have a very subtle problem, which is one sees that the danger of fear, which is brought about by thought, and fear destroys, perverts, makes the mind live in darkness, misery. And yet thought must be used most efficiently, objectively, without emotion. So what is the state of the mind that sees this? You understand? I hope I'm making myself clear. What is the state of the mind, your mind, now, as you observe this fact? The fact that thought must be employed, thought must function naturally, and thought also breeds fear. And with it, the fear of losing pleasure. When the mind sees this, what is that state that sees it? Are we meeting each other? Are we? Say yes or no, I don't know. You can't hear? I've talked nearly an hour. Are you saying you can't hear the end of it? Good Lord. Look, sir, this is very important to understand this very clearly. Because it's no good you're sitting there a whole hour listening to a lot of words that have no meaning. When at the end of it, when you leave, that you're still afraid. When you leave, there must be no fear. Not hypnotize yourself that there is no fear, but actually, psychologically, inwardly understand the whole structure of fear. And when you understand something, when you have studied something, when you have learned something, there's no fear. That's why it's very important to learn, to look. And what we are doing is to look, to observe very closely how fear comes into being. So we set thought, which is fairly simple and fairly clear when once you see it. When you think about something, when you think about death, when you think about losing your job, when you think about dozen things, either of the past or of the future, there is the inevitability of fear. Now when the mind sees this fact, that thought must function and also see the danger of thought. Now, what is the state of the mind, the quality of the mind? Rather, let me use the word the quality, not the state. The quality of the mind that sees this. You have to find out, not wait for me to tell you. Look, please listen carefully. It's so simple, really. We said analysis is no good. And we went into it, explained it. You've understood it. If you saw the truth of it, you have understood it. Before you have accepted analysis as part of your conditioning. Now when you see that the futility, the absurdity, the falseness of analysis, it has dropped away. Now, what is the state of the mind that has pushed or put aside an analysis? It's freer, isn't it? Therefore it's more alive, more active. And therefore much more intelligent, sharper, sensitive. And when you have seen the fact how fear comes into being, have learned about it, watched it, and the process of pleasure, and watched it. Watch your own state of mind, which has become now much more acute, much more alive, much more sharp, much clearer, therefore tremendously intelligent. This intelligence has nothing whatsoever to do with knowledge. With experience. You can't arrive at this intelligence or let this intelligence happen by going to a college and learning how to be sensitive. This intelligence comes when you have observed very closely the whole structure of analysis, what's implied in it, the analyzer, the analysed, time, this stupidity of thinking by one fragment is going to clear up the whole process. And see the nature of fear. And understanding what pleasure is. Seeing all that makes the mind extraordinarily sharp and clear, doesn't it? Therefore free. Therefore when you tomorrow or when you leave, fear comes upon you, which has become a habit, you will know how to meet it. and not postpone it. You will meet it. And the very meeting of it is the ending of it at that moment, because your intelligence is in operation. That means not only the fear, the known psychological known fears, but also the deep hidden fears. You know, I don't know if it is time for me to go on, is it? You know, one of the most strange things is how easily we are influenced. From childhood, you are brought up to be a Catholic, Protestant, American, or whatever it is. You're influenced. You're the result of propaganda. Keep on repeating, and you keep on repeating it. We are second-hand human beings. And it's very easy to be influenced. Therefore, be on your guard not to be influenced by the speaker. Because it's your life, not his life. And to go into the question of pleasure, because that also has to be understood. What pleasure is, what joy is, what real enjoyment is, which has nothing whatsoever to do with pleasure. And I don't know if we have time to go into that this evening. Because pleasure, for most of us, implies love. Has pleasure anything to do with love? Has pleasure, desire, has it any relationship with love? And I'm afraid it's too late to go into that this evening. Perhaps we'll do it on Saturday morning. But to understand all this, one has to observe oneself. You know, you are the result of the world. You're a human being who is part of the other human beings, whether they live in India or in China, in Russia or in America. We have all the same problems. Perhaps not economic, social, but human problems. We're all in great sorrow. Unhappy human beings, fighting, making tremendous efforts, and saying to ourselves, life has no meaning whatsoever as we live it. So we invent formulas for living. All that becomes so utterly unnecessary and stupid when you understand yourself, the structure of yourself, fear, pleasure, love, and the meaning of death. Then only you can live as a total human being and never do anything wrong. So, if you will ask, if you want to ask questions, bearing in mind that the question and the answer is within yourself. Yes, sir.
If fear is a thing that is not really, well, if fear has to be analyzed, or if fear is generated by an unknown, and you say that thought is wrong, or is the wrong way of going about understanding it.
I haven't quite understood, sir, sorry.
If the unknown is the thought of, oh shit, never mind.
I think I understand, sir. Are you saying most of us are frightened of the unknown, and that is the real basis of fear? Is that so? Or analysis? Can you analyze the unknown?
By getting into it, by understanding the unknown.
No, sir. Just listen for 2 minutes. You say you're frightened of the unknown. Either it is the unknown of tomorrow or the real unknown. Are you frightened of something you do not know? Or are you frightened of something you know, to which you are attached, and therefore you are frightened of leaving the known? Huh? You have understood, sir? Are you frightened of leaving the known and not frightened of the unknown? Look. Oh, I don't want to go into it now. What does it matter? When you are frightened of death, are you frightened of the unknown? Or are you frightened of the things coming to an end, of all these things you have known, your pleasures, your family, your achievements, your success, your furniture, your best polished car? How can one be frightened of something you do not know? And if you are frightened of it, thought wants to take it into the field of the known. And therefore, it begins to imagine. And therefore, your God is the product of your imagination or your fear. So, therefore, don't speculate about the unknown. Understand the known and be free of the known. Yes, madam.
I have read the expression, Father, I believe, help thou my disbelief. How can we accomplish anything with this apparent conflict of belief and yet doubt?
Beg your pardon, I haven't understood, madam.
Excuse me. I have read the expression, Father, I believe, help thou my disbelief.
Wait, I have read, Father, I believe. Wait a minute, that's enough, that's enough. She says, the questioner says, Father, I believe. She has read it somewhere. Why do you believe anything that you read? Doesn't matter whether it is in the Bible or in the Gita or in the sacred books of all the religions. Why? Do look at it, please. Why do you believe? Do you believe in the sunrise tomorrow? You believe in the sense you think it will arise. But you believe in heaven, you believe in a Father, you believe in something. Why? Because you are afraid. You're unhappy, lonely, fear of death. Therefore, believe in something that you think is permanent. Yes, sir. And therefore, please, see, a mind that is burdened with beliefs, how can such a mind see clearly? How can it be free to observe? How can such a mind love? And you have your belief and another has his belief. So is it, in understanding the whole business of fear, one has no belief whatsoever. The mind then functions beautifully, happily, without distortion. Therefore has great joy, ecstasy.
Sir, I have read your books, and I listen to you speak, and I hear you say beautiful things. I hear you speak of fear and how we should eliminate it from us. But the nature of the mind is full of desire. The mind is full of thoughts. Now, how are we to be free and to experience the freedom of mind as long as the mind is constantly...
Yes, the question is, and that has been the last question because it's quite late. The question is, how can the mind, which is so full of contradictions, so wandering all over the place, thought, jumping from one thing to another, chattering everlastingly, how can such a mind observe? How can such a mind be quiet to observe? Right, sir? What is the system? What is the system to quieten the mind? Or what is the pill that will tranquilize the mind? Mind is full of desire. Sir, look, what is the... See, I'm tired. What is desire? Why does the mind chatter so endlessly? Why?
dissatisfaction.
No, please don't answer it. Find out. So look, one thing. When you want a system, a method, a practice, a discipline to quieten the mind, to understand this or that, or put aside desire, this system becomes, the practicing of a system means a mechanical routine, do this thing over and over and over again. That is what the system implies. What takes place when the mind does that? It becomes a routine, it becomes a dull, stupid mind. Whereas if you understood why the mind chatters, why the mind goes from one thing to another, now, first of all, I don't think I can go into it this evening. Aren't you tired? You've had a long day, haven't you? I haven't. You've had a long day in the office. There it was routine. Here, you say you're not tired. That means you haven't been working. You haven't been pursuing sustained, serious investigation. That means you have just been entertained, and you will go away with your fears. And for God's sake, sir, what's the point of it? So, if you don't mind, we'll continue this thing on Saturday.